The first thing I want to talk about really is a very, very basic and simple question, but it confuses a lot of people. We call Shavuos the day that God gave us the Torah. Right? It's called Matan Torah, and of course it comes after 49 days of the Omer. And generally speaking, the significance of number 49 is very important. We talked somewhat about this. And I'll just mention very quickly, by way of very quick review, that there are two different, or maybe three different paradigms regarding the notion of 49 days of preparation. One is that Pirkei Avos tells us there are 48 qualities that you need in order to merit Torah. If you look at chapter 6, look at Perek Vav of Pirkei Avos, different 48 qualities, humility, happiness with Hashem, different qualities. And it's worthwhile to actually learn them to see the 48 ways. So the concept is, each day of the Omer, we work on one of those ways. And on day 49, which is Erev Shavuos, that's going to be Thursday, we kind of review everything. Right? So the number 49 fits very well. 48 days of step-by-step, coupled with a general review. So again, it would have been worthwhile. I regret now not doing it, that, to devote classes to 48 ways. But if you want to study it, and it's a very good thing to learn on Shavuos, look at, chapter 6, Pirkei Avos, 48 ways that the Torah is acquired. So that's one idea. The second idea of 49 is that it corresponds with the idea of the Sfiros, meaning to say God interacts with the world through 10 Sfiros, 10 emanations. But the first three emanations, which are crown, keser, chachma, wisdom, and understanding, are so beyond our comprehension that we don't even talk about them. But the lower seven are more of the emotional attributes, loving kindness, strength. So the concept is, each week corresponds to that particular divine emanation. So week 1 is loving kindness, then you have strength, then you have beauty, then you have eternity, then you have glory, then you have foundation, then you have kingship, etc. And each day within the week also corresponds to one of those 7 spheros, right? So we talked about this. I don't want to repeat the whole thing, but you'll recall that each day has both a position in the week and a position in the day. So for example, the first day of Sfira, which is the second day of Pesach, is called Chesed Shebechesed, the day of loving kindness that is situated in the week of loving kindness. The second day of the Omer, which is the third day of Pesach, is called Gevura Shebechesed, the strength and discipline within the week of Chesed. And that's to be distinguished from the first day of the second week, that is called Chesed of Gevura, the loving kindness of Gevura. Now, this can be very complicated. That's why there are 49 combinations, because you have 7 spiritual emanations for the weeks, and you have 7 spiritual emanations for the day. 7 times 7 gives you 49. And here, too, there is a complex matrix, in the sense that every single day has a unique spiritual configuration that we are supposed to emulate in our behavior. So week 1 is kindness, but within kindness there are different variations. So here too, I guess I'm kind of a Johnny-come-lately here because we're towards the end of Sfira, but here too there's some very excellent books, even in English, that map out specifically what should I do in my Avodas Hashem to mirror and incorporate the spiritual energies of that day. So for example, let's take today. Today is the 42nd day of the Omer. Right? We just finished 6 weeks. We're entering the last week. So the sixth week is the week of Yosef. And the 7th day, the 6th week is the week of Yosef, and the last day of the week is David. Or, in terms of the Spheros, this is called Malchus, kingship, of Yesod, of foundation. Malchus of Yesod, the day of David, the week of Yosef. But what does that mean, right? So the concept is, again, you need to get a book or a calendar, even have Sfiras Omer calendars that just do it in kind of in a very abbreviated way, that we have to incorporate part of the midos of Yosef and David in our particular Avodas Hashem. So basically what I'm saying is, there are two different paradigms of the concept of the 49. One connects them to Pirkei Avos, which are 48 ways to acquire Torah, and the 49th day is the Chazara of all the 48 ways. And the second paradigm is the Kabbalistic paradigm of incorporating one of the lower 7 emanations and mapping it out, both based on the day and based on the week. And that's the idea of Sfiros. Now, there is a third paradigm, actually, so there's a total of 4, actually, very quickly, that basically says that Matan Torah is like a marriage between God and the Jewish people. We are the Kala. Actually, it's interesting. We're kind of androgynous here because vis-a-vis our marriage to God, we are the woman and God is the man. But there's also a marriage to the Torah where we are the man and the Torah is the woman. So we have two different roles here. I guess in this age of transgender, now that's chas v'shalom. Okay, anyway. But the point is that we do have these two different identities, masculine, feminine, because the Shekhinah itself has these different aspects. So Matan Torah is described as a wedding. It's a chasna. In fact, Sfardim have a minhag that they actually read on Shavuos something that's written in the form of a kesuva, right? A kesuva when you get married, right? So there's a kesuva. So they have a kesuva where Hashem is the chasan and we're the kala, and it's mirrored after the language of the kesuva, but applying it in the relationship of God to the Jewish people. Now, before a woman can get married to her husband, if she ever menstruated, she is a nida. A nida must separate for 7 days of purity before she can be united with her husband. So it is said that when we left the Tuma, the impurity of Mitzrayim, just as a Kala needs 7 days of purification, we needed 7 weeks of purification. So it's a multiple. And therefore the notion of the 7 weeks of the Sfira are to purify ourselves spiritually before we're able to be married, Kav Yochel, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? So I've mentioned like 3 different ways of, and these are not contradictory, I mean, all of them are true. 3 different ways of envisioning the Omer period. One equal to the 48 ways of the Torah, coupled with a 49th day of review and integration. The second is to incorporate in our lives the spiritual energy of the Sfiros, based on the mapping of the week and the day. The third is to look at the weeks as the weeks of purification, analogous to the 7 days that a woman needs before she can be reunited with her husband. So we have 7 weeks. Again, that doesn't explain why do you go from days to weeks, but okay, but nevertheless, these 7 weeks, this is from the Zohar. The Zohar HaKadosh says that the 7 weeks of the Omer are equivalent to the 7 clean days, the days of purification that a Nida needs. Now, a 4th paradigm, which is again familiar to you, this may have been the first thing that you heard, is that when the Jewish people were in Mitzrayim, they had descended to the 49th level of impurity, a very, very deep level of impurity. There's only 50 levels. When you hit level 50, you're irredeemable. You're beyond hope. They were level 49, and they were slipping into level 50, and that's why Hashem had to take them out 190 years earlier. We should have been in Mitzrayim, as you know, for 400 years, and instead Hashem took us out after 210 years, 190 early, because had we waited even another minute or so, whatever that means exactly, we would have hit level 50. In fact, the Arizal says that's the meaning of the pasuk of Chametz, that we were not able to let our dough rise, and we had to bake it before it rose, and that's how you get matzah. So the simple meaning of the pasuk is Paro was kicking us out. So, we didn't have time. But the Arizal says, no. It was Hashem that said, you got to leave this second. Because if you even wait the amount of time it takes for the dough to rise, I don't even understand this. You're going to hit level 50. And once you hit level 50, it's going to be kaput. Right? That's the Ariz Chiddush that we were on the shot, right? So based on that, the idea was that every day of the Omer, we elevate ourselves over one level of impurity, and we correspondingly acquire a level of purity, and therefore we go up, and therefore by the time of Matan Torah, we actually reached, and we messed up with the golden calf, unfortunately, but on the day of Matan Torah, we reached the level of Adam Harishain before the Chet, before the sin. We actually would have had immortality. We would have lived forever. Death was canceled. Again, we keep on making the same mistake. Adam and Chava were put in the Garden of Eden, and without getting into the full explanation of it, they messed up. They got expelled. Well, we get a second chance. Matan Torah elevates us to the Garden of Eden, essentially. And once again, we mess up. Right? So it's we have a propensity for error that exists in the world. And at this point, our next chance, which hopefully we will not flub up, is Mashiach and the like. But until then, we're living in this world of confusion, this world of darkness, this world of challenge, and the like. Okay, so these are four very basic paradigms for how you view the 49-day period of the Omer. It's connected to the 48 ways of acquiring Torah, plus a chazara and an integration. It is connected to the spiritual energy of the Sfiros. It is connected to the 7 clean days that a Nida must purify herself to be ready to be with her husband, and Matan Torah is a wedding. And finally, it's to escape the 49 levels of Tumah that had imprisoned us in Mitzrayim, for which we had to leave 190 years early, and therefore this enabled us to overcome all of those forces of Tumah and to reach the Madrega of Adam Harishain before the Chet. Yeah.
My one question on that is that just from the actual pasuk, it's difficult to understand how the Sfera Omer is a preparation for Matan Torah, because the Torah itself doesn't make any mention of Shavuot being Matan Torah, especially for Sfera being a preparation for Matan Torah.
Well, yeah. The two questions are connected. The reason why the Torah does not mention that Sfera is a preparation for Matan Torah is because the Torah does not mention that Shavuos is the day of Matan Torah. That itself is a well-known issue. If you look, the Torah does say we celebrate a Yom Tov after counting 49 days, and it mentions that we bring a wheat offering of 2 loaves of bread. It absolutely, in other words, if I ask you, tell me why the Chumash says, why does the Torah say that you celebrate a holiday called Shavuos? The only reason that's given in the Torah is it is the day of the first fruits, and it's the day of the wheat harvest. It's connected to that. Pesach was the barley harvest, which is earlier, and the wheat harvest a little later. Meaning Shavuos is only given in agricultural significance. It is Bichlal not even mentioned as Matan Torah. Now, l'chayra, from our perspective, that's kind of what we call Iker Chaser Min HaSefer. The most important part of the story is not even in the book. Right? When we daven, we of course say Shavuos is Zaman Matan Torasenu, the day that God gave us the Torah, and yet the Torah doesn't make that claim. So it's fascinating that the Maharal offers the following explanation. This is kind of blows your mind a little bit. He says, the Torah cannot say rejoice because of Matan Torah, because Whether that's a happy thing or not a happy thing depends on how I behave. Meaning to say, for some people, it might be better if they didn't have a Torah. Meaning if someone is not living by the Torah, but God created rules and accountability, gee, I'm in big trouble. I would be better off maybe without all of these mitzvahs that I'm not keeping. So Memela, when the Torah says why you celebrate Shavuos, it has to give a reason that applies to every Jew. Listen, even if you're not from, Shavuos is the wheat harvest. Be happy. Masha'en Kain, the Maral says, the happiness of Matan Torah is not a function of God, it's a function of you. You can make the Torah the greatest event that ever happened because it is the source of your happiness and your connection to God and you're giving God nachas. Or you could make it almost a tragedy that a Torah was given that's being desecrated and being violated and being ignored. So God says, whether or not Matan Torah is a simcha, that's your thing. But I can tell you it's a simcha because at least there's a wheat harvest that in Eretz Yisrael is very, very important. You know, Shavuos, I think, among Jews who are not Orthodox, is the least known holiday. I remember very well, you know, because Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, you know, everyone does something on that. Sukkos, they see a sukkah around, you know, they see things going around. Pesach, of course, is the Seder. That's a very, very, whether it's a kosher Seder or not, but it's a very commonly observed ritual. There's something, and even Hanukkah, which is not Hanukkah is not even a Yom Tov, but Hanukkah, people like to light Hanukkah candles and the like. But Shavuos, I remember when I was in law school after my first year, I was a law student, so I took a job, a summer job, in a insurance company as a young intern or whatever it was. So I told my boss, who was a very, very nice Irish Catholic gentleman, my supervisor, that Shavuos was like the beginning of June or something. So I said, I'm going to have to take off 2 days, in Chutz La'aretz, 2 days, for the holiday, for the Jewish holiday. So he says, sure, we accommodate Jewish holidays, no problem. So he comes to my office like 45 minutes later and says, I just have to talk to you. He says, I spoke to every Jewish attorney in the office. And of course, there are plenty of Jewish attorneys. He says, none of them ever heard of this holiday. Could I supply some verification? So Baruch Hashem, I got the verification. Everything was fine. But it was quite amazing. They literally were not even aware that there was a holiday called Shavuos. In a sense, that kind of almost makes the Maral's point that Matan Torah is not such a great simcha for a lot of people. They're not, they don't connect to it. So that's something to think about. Now, it is interesting, there is a machlokas, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua. How do you celebrate a Yom Tov generally? Because there's a contradiction in the Torah. Sometimes the Torah says the Yom Tov is to be devoted to God, Hashem. You daven, you learn. And sometimes the Torah says the Yom Tov is lachem, it's for you to enjoy yourself, eating and drinking. So how do you reconcile the pasuk that says it's for God and the pasuk that says it's for you? So listen to this. There's a machlokas, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Eliezer understands the two psukim are either or. Meaning, you can either devote the day totally to God. Meaning, according to Rabbi Eliezer, you don't have to eat food on Yom Tov. If you want to learn and daven all day, that's great. Or if you want to spend most of the day eating and drinking, that's great. You have a choice, this or that. Rabbi Yoshua, however, and we paskin this way, says you don't have a choice. You got to do both. Half of the day, it's not exactly half, but half of the day is for learning and davening, and half of the day or some of the day is for eating and drinking. That's how we paskin, meaning it's not an either or, but you got to do both. That in your Yom Tov, you must incorporate spiritual worship of Hashem and physical enjoyment of food. Now, then the Gemara goes on and says the following surprising idea. The machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua is talking about during Pesach, not Seder, but during the rest of Pesach and during Sukkos. But on Shavuos, even Rabbi Eliezer, who normally says you don't have to have a meal, on Shavuos you have to have a meal. You have to eat. You have to have blintzes, cheesecake, whatever it is. You must, because it is the day that Hashem gave the Torah. Now, if you think about this for a moment, it's actually a non sequitur. Because I might have said the other way. I might have said, even Rabbi Yoshua says you have to eat, on Shavuos, the day that we got the Torah, I could devote the whole day to learning. I mean, that would have been the logical sequence. But the Gemara says the opposite. On Shavuos, that's the day we got the Torah, you have to eat. Even like Rabbi Eliezer, that gives you the option of not eating on a Yom Tov. You got to eat. So, why is that so? Why should it be the day that I get the Torah is the day that I have to eat? So, Meshech Mother, Maral, many different Sfarim say it in somewhat of a different way. But they say the following. There's a famous, the Gemara about Matan Torah. Again, this is also something that might be nice to learn Shavuos night. There are 2 or 3 blots in Masechah Shabbos that go over many midrashim about the giving of the Torah. But one of the most famous midrashim is when Moshe went up to Shemayim to get the Torah, the angels in heaven were arguing that Hashem should not give the Torah to human beings at all. They said the Torah is so holy, the Torah is so elevated, the Torah is so spiritual. It is God's will and God's mind. What are you besmirching it by giving it to people who are going to break it and violate it? Keep the Torah in heaven. And Moshe was so frightened. Imagine going up to Shemayim, all of these angels, all of this fire. And Moshe was so Hashem said to Moshe, give him a good answer. And Moshe was too scared to even say anything. So Hashem said, hold on to my divine throne, and that will give you strength. And Moshe holds on to the heavenly throne. And now Moshe has to come up with an answer. And Moshe's answer basically is, well, listen, hey, you angels say Hashem shouldn't give the Torah to people, keep it in heaven. Well, let's see. The Torah says, honor your father and mother. Do you angels have a father or mother? You don't. You're created. You're not born. The Torah says, don't eat meat and milk. Do you eat? Do you eat or drink at all? And the basic argument is that the Torah was given to a world, or in a world of physicality. In a world where we take the physical and we elevate it. Meaning, the Torah cannot exist in Shemayim. Now, it may be the ultimate spiritual meanings of things have a heavenly relevance. But operationally, do they put on tefillin in Shemayim? Do they wear tzitzis? Do they honor their parents? Do they take lulav and esrog? There's no physical way that the Torah can be kept in Shemayim. The Torah has to be kept by human beings who are physical, who are involved in material needs, who struggle with the Yetzer Hara and perfect themselves by fighting the Yetzer Hara, by keeping the mitzvahs. And this was Moshe's victorious response. Why the Torah had to leave heaven and come down to earth. So now the Gemara makes perfect sense. You got to eat, because if all you're going to do is spiritually learn in heaven, the angels could do that better than you. The angels contemplate God, they're connected to God. If you want to show why we're entitled to the Torah over the Malachim, you have to be involved in activities that the angels do not get involved in. To show, and of course this is an important idea of Yiddishkeit generally. There are religions, actually classical Christianity is one of them, that preach a certain ethic of asceticism in which the physical world, God, the Gashmias of the world, is said to be something evil, something you have to avoid, that Gashmias will take you away from Hashem. That is why, in Catholicism, the highest level of holiness is celibacy, where you don't have sexual union with a woman. Again, it has not been a workable idea for the Christian church, because it's led to many, many things that are a lot worse than getting married. But nevertheless, in theory, the idea was that the holiness came from separation. Similarly, at least in theory, a holy person takes a vow of poverty, like a monk, not allowed to own anything. Because that is a paradigm in which the physicality of the world is fundamentally evil. And that evil is going to drag you down. And the only way you can achieve holiness is by removing yourself from that physicality to whatever extent. Now, in many ways, by definition, that is a recipe for failure. Because by definition, you're going to have to eat. I mean, something's going to happen. Judaism taught a different thing. Judaism taught that physicality is, in itself, is neither evil nor good. Physicality is neutral. And one can use physicality, one can use materialism in elevated and high ways. So, yes, you get married, you engage. I'm sorry, did you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, as long as you're addressing the kind of fundamental issues here.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you a question, but how is messiness and the idea of the Messiah coming kind of compatible with this? If you achieve perfection, then you lose your kind of connection.
Well, achieving perfection, meaning the idea is that we serve Hashem, we do all of these mitzvos, and then we reach a level where our souls are ready to be connected to God at a very high level. But it's the culmination of all of the work that we put in. It's kind of the... Well, again, the truth is the Messianic era is not the same as reaching the level of angels. You know, people are still going to die in the Messianic era, and we're still going to be doing mitzvahs, but it means we simply have easier conditions to be able to serve God, meaning a peaceful world, a Beis HaMikdash, prophecy. In other words, it's not that the angelic state is Olam Haba. That's when a person dies now. They go to Olam Haba, and then we're like angels. Indeed, we're like angels, but that's a product of all the work that we put in. Yemot Mashiach is a different type of thing. Mashiach is very much serving God even in this world. So what the Torah taught is, the Torah taught that physicality itself can be good, can be holy, can be elevated. Yes, we have sexual relations, but within the context of a loving and exclusive marriage, and to have children. We eat food like animals, but we make brachos before we eat, after we eat, and we eat food to honor Shabbos, honor Yom Tov, or to have strength and energy to be able to learn and daven. So the eating and the drinking now becomes a mitzvah in itself. So this is a very important concept, that the Torah teaches us to elevate the physical rather than escape it. And that is why on Shavuos B'dafka, we don't celebrate by asceticism or renunciation. Rather, the Gemara says, everybody is moda, you have to have a meal. On the day that the Torah was given, you have to have a meal. Yeah.
I was just thinking about the concept of Matan.
Yeah.
And could we bring together the moment of Matan Torah and Ratzon Klal Israel? Like, would it be at the same time when the Ratzon of the Jewish people reached the level of, like, is that, does it come together? Like,
well, you know, there had to be an alignment, which is itself is a very interesting question. Why did the Torah have to be accepted at all? Why was it accepted? I mean, God is the boss. God can just say, do it. It didn't work that way. We are obligated to keep the Torah. But we are obligated to keep the Torah only because we accepted the Torah. at Sinai. It's a strange idea that our obligation to keep the Torah is not because God commanded it, it's because we accepted it. Very, very interesting. Now, it's true. Had we not accepted it, there may have been some very drastic consequences. That's the famous teaching that Hashem held a mountain over our heads and said, if you accept the Torah, that's great. If not, you'll be a pancake. But of course, let me just digress on that for a moment. You know, Tosas already asks the kasha, if it turns out the Jewish people accepted the Torah because God put a gun to their head or put a mountain over their head, no, that's coercion. That's not a real acceptance. What, if I say, sell me your house or I'm going to blow out your brains, you know, we're not going to call that a true consensual transaction. So what's going on with this game? In other words, if God is going to say, I don't care about your consent, that's one thing. He has the right to do that. But if he cares about our consent, but gets it through threat of imminent death, then that's not real consent. So you know what the Maharal says? Maharal says a fascinating idea. God did not hold the mountain over their head before they accepted the Torah. They accepted the Torah willingly, and then God tells them afterwards, wow, it's lucky that you accepted the Torah, because had you not accepted the Torah, that would have been the end of the universe. Now, that's a totally different message, because here's the thing. God couldn't have told us, accept the Torah, I'm destroying the universe, because then we wouldn't have accepted it really, it would have been forced. So God can't tell us the consequences of our not accepting. It had to be a free choice. It had to be a genuine choice to be meaningful. But that choice was so important that if it wouldn't have been made, there'd be no reason for the world to exist, the universe to exist. But God can't tell us that ahead of time. After the fact, he says, wow, it's lucky you made the right decision. That's a beautiful shot. In other words, what is being taught here is that this was not coercion. This was telling the Jewish people after the fact how momentously important their decision was. And that was bedafka, something they couldn't have been informed of before they made the decision, because that would have rendered their decision less meaningful. It would have been a meaningless decision if I made it, because otherwise the universe is going to be destroyed. But if I make the decision willingly, God can then tell me, wow, the whole universe depended on your making that decision at the right time. So it is quite amazing that God wanted consent, because Torah is ultimately about relationship. Torah is a relationship of love. Now, tough love to be sure, because just as a loving parent, will punish a child if necessary. But ultimately, it's about developing a relationship with God. And the relationship requires both parties to want that relationship. And therefore, God wanted us to want, not just be commanded. God wanted us to want to have that relationship with God. Now, I think it may be in the Tanya, but it's certainly in Sifrei Chasidus. The very word mitzvah, this is fascinating. You translate mitzvah. Mitzvah means commandment, right? Doesn't mean good deed, by the way. That for some reason, I don't know, in modern culture, even on TV shows, they'll say, it's a mitzvah, whatever it is. Yeah. A good deed is not, a mitzvah means a commandment, something you got to do. But in the Sifrei Chasidus, there's another connection, and that is mitzvah comes from tzavsa. Tzavsa is Aramaic for a federation, a group of people together. In modern Hebrew, a tzavat, or tzevet, is a staff. Right? You sometimes see whatever it is, whether it's a cleaning or whatever it is they wear in tzevet, hotel. So tzavsa means it's a way of having a collaboration, a relationship with Hashem. Tzavsa, you become united with God. And that's a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful thing. And that's why Matan Torah itself took on the tzura of we want that relationship. And in the first word of the Ten Commandments, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slavery. And of course, that's the first commandment we say. Now, what is that a commandment? That's not commanding anything. That's just declaring, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. So the Rambam says the very first commandment is emunah, to believe in this God. That's Rambam. Ramban asks a very logical question. How can God command you to believe in him if you don't believe in him? There's nobody that has the authority to give you that command. It's like somebody says he's an atheist. He doesn't believe in God. So I say, you have to believe in God. So the person says, why do I have to believe in God? He says, because God said you have to believe in him. I mean, that's not an answer to an atheist. He says, I don't believe in God. So Ramban asks on Rambam, how can there be a commandment to believe in God? But the explanation that's given for the Rambam is that obviously the commandment to believe in God cannot be directed to a non-believer, but it's directed to a believer. I believe in God because I was taught that way by my parents, but now I'm obligated to understand it intellectually and philosophically. So, and that's the Rambam's well-known shita, which many people argue with. Hasidus argues with. But the Rambam feels that one has to intellectually be persuaded of the existence of God through philosophy and the like. Other people consider that a dangerous mahalach, but that's how the Rambam defines the mitzvah of emunah. But the point I wanted to leave with you is that the first word is anochi, I. Now the normal word for I in most of the Torah, although there are many exceptions, is ani. Ani is the normal word for I. Anochi is an alternative word for I. But whenever it says anochi instead of ani, there's always going to be a reason for that deviation. And the Gemara in Shabbos says, anochi is an abbreviation. Anoah nafshi kisavit vihavit. Aramaic. I have inscribed in this Torah and given to you my very soul. God is saying, I put my soul in the Torah. I put my essence in the Torah. When you connect to the Torah, which is my essence, my soul, this is Hashem talking, you are connecting to me. Ana is I, nafshi, my soul, kisavit, I wrote it into this, vihavit, and I'm giving it to you. Okay, that's what Torah is. Torah is that connection, relationship connection to God, in which this is God's very soul, God's very essence.
Are we all part of one whole soul?
Well, that doesn't mean by we, but if you mean the Jewish people, for sure that is the case. We are all...
Doesn't everybody have their individual one?
Yes. We are offshoots, meaning to say there is, in Shemayim, so to speak, a gigantic collectivity that is called Knesset Yisrael, the gathering of the Jewish people, which is directly connected to God, and then it branches off into individual souls. But we are connected at the root, meaning it would be similar to a tree that has many, many, many branches and branches off the branches. So all of us are branched off, but we're all connected at the root. In fact, the Baal HaTanya says a beautiful thing. You know, there's a great mitzvah of ahavta l'recha kamocha, right? Loving your fellow like you love yourself. But how can I do that? I mean, I'm me and you're you. So the Baal HaTanya says, we are separated only on the level of the physical body. I have my body, you have your body, so it looks like we're separated. But on the level of soul, we are actually united because we're rooted in Knesset Yisrael. So the Baal HaTanya says, the more you focus on the body, the less you'll be able to connect to another person. Because you're accentuating your differences. You're accentuating the fact that I'm me and you're you. But if I focus on the spiritual neshama, I'm no longer going to have a sense that I'm different than you, because ultimately on the level of neshama, we are all rooted. And therefore the Baal HaTanya says that the way you reach Avat Yisrael is by focusing on the spiritual life. Because on the spiritual level, we're one. Actually, I once heard that as a beautiful mashal for marriage. Somebody once said that a good marriage is like climbing up the side of a pyramid, which is pretty hard to do, but let's imagine it, right? A pyramid is very wide at the bottom. So the man is on one side of the pyramid and a woman is on the other side of the pyramid. There's no way horizontally they can reach each other. How do you get through the rock? How do you get through the stone? But if they all climb to the top, at the type that they're going to be together automatically. So that's the idea. You look to connect to God, you're going to reach a unity at the very top of the pyramid. And that's kind of what the Baal HaTanya is saying as well, because the more we focus on the spiritual essence of the other person and ourselves, the more we're going to be connected, because our neshamos are in fact one. And in fact, you have to say that, because otherwise Matan Torah doesn't work that much, because I spent a lot of time just describing that Matan Torah had to be done by acceptance. We had to accept it. So the big problem is, well, I didn't accept it. In other words, that was a generation that accepted it. But I didn't accept it. Why do I have to keep it? I didn't accept it. The answer is, all the neshamos of the Jewish people were one. And they did accept it. So you accepted it, I accepted it as part of that collective neshama. So the collectivity of Am Yisrael is exactly why Matan Torah is binding, even if I didn't as an individual express my particular consent. So, as I say, we have just finished the 6th week of Sfira. We're in the home stretch, and B'ezras Hashem, I hope all of us should be zocha to prepare ourselves for Matan Torah with love.
Thank you, Rabbi.